So issues of gender parity or race or equality, they're really sensitive. But for some of us, you're dealing with it. You're really dealing with the brand, because you're not just dealing with briefing patterns and these disparities from a place because you are a woman, but you're also a Black woman. So we are always at the bottom of the barrel. Anyone who is honest enough will tell you that Black women are at the bottom of the barrel. Before, a white male is considered, a non-Black, a non-white male will be considered, then a Black male in the traditional African sense will be considered maybe a white female, maybe a non-traditionally African or non-white female will be considered. And then there's us somewhere there at the bottom when now people want. Yeah, when all the positions are taken. But with that said, it doesn't mean we mustn't try. It mustn't mean we mustn't play our own role. It doesn't mean that we don't work hard and we don't do what we can as people to establish ourselves on merit. I certainly can't sit here and say I've never been given opportunities at the bar, either by senior colleagues, by attorneys who had briefed me, because some have heard good things, or some have seen my work, or some have heard me argue. Really, it's a number of things that has put my practice where it is today. And like I said, I'm one of the privileged few. I'm immensely grateful to all the people who've trusted me with.
All right. How do you think,
even matters that I wasn't sure were within my ability?
How do you think these issues of gender inequalities and inequality of color can be addressed, particularly by those who are in positions of advantage? What role can they play?
Well, for one, you can recognize that you come from a place of privilege, whatever the privilege is. It might be your privilege because of your skin color. It might be your privilege because of your gender. It might be your privilege because of your socioeconomic status and position. You may come from money, you may come from politics, you may come from certain connections that you have, but you first have to recognize that you're coming from a place of privilege, and that other people are not as fortunate as you. And I think once you're honest enough to realize that there are people with different struggles, no matter how hard they work, no matter how much they try to establish themselves on merit, if you're able to recognize that there's some people who are struggling to succeed, specifically in the legal profession, because there are added obstacles, there are barriers. I mean, it's only this year, a few months ago, that the LPC promulgated a rule wherein law firms are no longer entitled, in fact, they're forbidden in interviews and in advertising posts for articles to request candidates to have cars or ask them about their cars and things like that. That has always been one of those things that added to the barrier in entering the profession from a place of being an attorney. You couldn't even dream of being part of certain law firms if you didn't come from a certain level of privilege. It's hard enough going through law school and being a graduate from a university that's not one of the previously disadvantaged or still seen as disadvantaged today. That's on its own it's a different struggle, and it's a different discussion altogether. But even with all of those things, then there were added on barriers. There were barriers about you don't have a vehicle. So no matter what kind of a candidate you are, no matter how hardworking you are, no matter what your academic record says about you, which is a different discussion again on its own, you wouldn't be able to get into a certain position, and then you would be denied that opportunity to harness your skill and maybe become the sort of practitioner you could have been, simply because you didn't come from a certain place of privilege. So first of all, let's acknowledge our privileges, people. Let's acknowledge that the struggle is not the same for women. It's not the same for Black women. It's not
Mm.
the same for Black people in general. And even with that said, it's worse for people who come from certain impoverished and disadvantaged backgrounds. So
Yes.
we
Okay.
start with the recognition, and then we now ask ourselves what it is you're willing to part with. Because if you're not willing to positively take action once you recognize that you come from a certain privilege, and once you recognize that there's a certain amount of injustice in the world, or a certain amount of injustice in your world, and you are coming from a place of power and you can do something to change that, then nothing is going to change. You don't only just recognize that you're privileged and that you have power, you need to make a decision to do something about it. Even if it means that decision means you need to perpetuate in the state, you need to stop perpetuating the status quo. You need to
Yes.
change the narrative. You need to disturb certain comforts of people that they've come to be accustomed to. And
Mm.
you might find yourself on the unpopular side of your friend or your family or your colleagues or one person or another, or you might find yourself, God forbid, maybe even on the wrong side of history or the right side of history. But once you acknowledge that something has to change, you need to be willing to change it.
Yeah. Take initiative.
Take that initiative, do
Yeah.
something. Don't just sit there.
Yeah.
Create those opportunities, change those rules. um I mean, I can imagine how many people were unhappy with the decision by the LPC to come up with this rule that you cannot ask candidates to about their cars, about having a car. You
Mm.
can make it a requirement. You can ask about it in an interview. I can imagine how many law firms were displeased with this decision, with that thinking. But
Mm.
it was an unpopular decision, perhaps, but it was necessary. And it was necessary, it was made by people who had the power, but who recognized that there was something fundamentally wrong
Yes.
with that line of thinking.
Yes. While on the agenda of transformation, you mentioned also financial privilege. For instance, in most advocate bars, uh, pupil advocates are not paid a stipend or anything, as is the case with candidate attorneys. Do you also think for those who come from financially needy backgrounds, find that the fact that they are not paid any stipend or anything as pupil advocates as a barrier for them to enter into the legal profession? Because I've noted that Pabasa does offer a stipend or some form of remuneration to their um, pupil advocates. Do you think that's the direction that needs to be followed? Uh, can you please just hear your
I
view
mean,
on that?
I don't think it's rocket science, to be honest. I don't
Yeah.
think it's rocket science. First of all, pupillage is a year. And now, based on this vocational training requirement, it should be a tad bit longer. I'm not entirely sure what the resolution has been in that regard. But let's just say it takes you at least a year and 6 months to finish the whole training and the process of entering into the bar. You still have to establish a practice. And while you're establishing a practice, you're going to be a member of a group. While you are a member of a group, you're going to pay bar fees, you're going to pay group fees, you're going to pay fees to the LPC. Um, and you're also going to pay chambers if you are part of a traditional bar where you occupy chamber space. That is money. Apart from the fact that you've probably spent a good year of your life not earning an income, whether you come directly from university, um, if you do, I submit that unless you have a family that can, or some financial means that can support you through that year, there's absolutely no way you can go through that period without financial support.
Mm.
So, who are the people with financial support? Of course, it's people with some sort of financial privilege, because no one who doesn't have the financial privilege will survive a year without an entire income. If you have to travel to classes, if you have to go to court, if you have to buy books, there's added on financial responsibilities that come with doing pupillage. Apart from not earning an income, you need money. to
Yeah.
actually go through pupillage successfully. You need to buy material. You need to be presentable. You need to eat. You need to shower. You need to travel to classes. You need to travel to court. You need to print. You need to copy. There's so many unforeseen costs in the pupillage journey that if you didn't save, if you're a person who was working previously, and that's why they tell you these things. Did you save? They ask you, did you save? When I was doing pupillage, it was an important question if I had saved enough, if I had a plan. What would I do if I didn't pass pupillage? What kind of financial support did I have? Those were important questions then.
Yes.
Pabasa, as you said, has recognized the need to support pupils financially. I don't know what the statement is. I don't know if the statement is effective. I can't speak to it. I do understand that the fact that they recognize in the first place is a step in the right direction. And it should help because, for example, we know that people generally don't always come from Johannesburg, those who want to come and do pupillage here. In my pupillage year, there were tons of people who came from the Eastern Cape and KZN and other provinces. Those people need to stay somewhere. Some of them do have family here, some of them don't. They come into Gauteng and Johannesburg specifically for the first time in their life. And they get here, they need to live somewhere. It's expensive to live in Johannesburg. So yeah, the inability to earn financially during pupillage is an added on struggle. You are not entitled to earn a fee from pupillage. You can't charge for your services. It's literally against the rules and the legislation. So how else are you supposed to survive if you don't have the money already? Of course, there were fellowships with some institutions, for example, the LRC, but that's just really one institution that comes at the top of my mind. And they can only take on so many people at a time anyway. So that really doesn't help unless the bars come to the table and they start assisting and aiding pupils to survive the pupillage year. But like I said, beyond surviving pupillage and the added on financial burden that it put on people, because people don't come to the bar at the same point in their life. Some are fathers, some are people who had mortgage bonds, car payments, children to feed, wives, some are wives themselves, some are mothers, some are brothers, some are daughters to other people. Some really do come from privilege, but some really don't. And for those that don't, it's a serious consideration to make before you even think about pupillage. I've said this to so many people who've reached out to me personally, that you really think about whether you can survive the year financially. And whether you can survive another 6 months to a year after that, because there is no telling. I can tell you now, there's absolutely no telling how quickly your practice will take off. I started pupillage with some people who, on paper, and based on where they came from, you would think they would have the biggest practices by now. You would think their practices would have taken off instantly, but didn't. No practice takes off. No, there is absolutely no way of knowing. You can do everything you can. You can practice as an attorney. You can have an established network. You can come with a PhD. You can come with all the experience in the world. You can, listen, you can come from Cambridge, Oxford, Harvard for all you want, but there is still absolutely no guarantee, especially if you belong to a certain demographic of this country.
Yes.
In relation to how quickly your practice will take off. So it could be years before you start earning a living.
Oh, that's very important.
But while I'm on that, let me just also mention that the other rule, which has, it's been discussed back and forth, and there are bars who've changed it. But the other thing about practice is that the rule right now, for us Johannesburg practitioners or those who belong to the JSA, is that you get paid 97 days after you've invoiced. That's a good almost 4 months, because some attorneys may pay early, some may pay on time, some actually really, you will even struggle to get your money out of them. But that's another added on benefit that should be discussed. That's another barrier to people's practices actually, one, taking off and being sustainable. Because after that prolonged period of not earning an income, you now go into a period of having overheads, of having expenses, business expenses, as any business would, because believe it or not, this is a business. You are self-employed. You have to pay chambers. If you have a secretary, you must pay your secretary. You don't have to have one, but if you do, you must pay your secretary. They expect them a salary at the end of the month. There's petrol fees. There's a car if you're paying for a car. There's all these expenses, including your own living expenses and the living expenses of your dependents, if you have them, that will start happening immediately. Those expenses are not going to wait for 97 days until when you get your first paying gig, which there is also no guarantee what the nature of that brief will be. You must still get briefs. They must keep coming, and you must keep delivering on the work and quality work at that for you to keep getting return business. And when that doesn't happen, it really stifles your practice and stifles your spirit and even your ability and your willingness to stay in the profession. Because what you quickly realize is you can run a bigger loss and become far more poor as an advocate in practice than you ever would have been had you been a normal employee, even in the state or in a law firm or literally anywhere else, even in civil society, where we know generally that it's really about the commitment. It's about your passion for serving people. It's not about the money. But even in that sector, you might just find that you have been far better off, and you may have been able to feed yourself or your family had you stayed in that sector and not come into the bar.
The bar. Thank you so much for that information. That's all from me for now. Thank you so much. Can you at least give a word of advice to young women out there who want to pursue a career in advocacy, particularly Black women, young Black women for that matter?
I have so much to say in that arena. So firstly, let me put it out there. It's not all doom and gloom. It's certainly not all bad. It's not doom and gloom. If you're passionate about the law, if you want to be a litigation specialist, if your passion is going to court and arguing your heart out, if you want to change the law, if you want to change jurisprudence, if you want to develop it further, or if you just want to preserve it, if your passion is advocacy, or if your passion is drafting, if you are a litigant at heart, the bar is probably for you, and if beyond that you want to be at the bench, there's no better way of crafting your skill as a practitioner than to be an advocate. There's a lot less administration involved as opposed to when you're an attorney. You're far less of an administrator and far more of a fighter and a warrior in court, if you want to even call it that. So if you're about the battlefield, the bar is probably for you. I mean, if you want to fight law and you're not necessarily just only a policymaker and whatnot, because there are many fields that people can go into. But like I said, if that's what you're interested in, going into the arena, fighting the good fight, then you probably want to do it. You probably want to come to the bar.
Yeah.
And if it does work for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, well, it doesn't. It's not all bad. You just need to be patient. Earlier, when you asked me, what are some of the skills you needed? And I said you needed to be resilient and you needed to be patient. It's because it will take time.
Yeah.
It's because people will doubt you. It's because people will not, when you walk into the room, their first instinct is not to trust you. It's not to see you and think this one is going to blow this case out of the water. That's not what people think when they see young Black women.
Yeah.
So you will have to teach people to respect you. You will have to teach people to trust you. You will have to work 3 times, 4 times harder than your counterpart, whether it's your male counterpart only, whether it's your white counterpart. You will have to prove yourself to people because nobody will just trust you. Nobody will just give you work. You don't come with that privilege. That's the first thing any Black female who wants to come to the bar must accept. You are vulnerable. You will have to fight yourself, and you will have to fight for other fellow Black women. You will probably want to be around people you can trust. It's always a good idea to have mentors. It's an even better idea to have female mentors, because the female struggle at the bar is so different from the male struggle. Whatever gender, whatever race males are, they do not go through half of the drama and difficulties that only women at the bar can relate to. So that's you must be alive to those things before you do it. But you mustn't be scared, you know? If you're really passionate, if it's what you want to do, then you must take on the challenge. You must take on a challenge because it is a challenge. You must heed the call. Like any calling, coming to the bar is a calling. There's a reason people say I was called to the bar at this time. It's because you can't just do it willy-nilly. It's not like waking up and playing the lottery or taking a gamble and deciding, ooh, should I be an advocate or an attorney? Should I be a teacher or a policeman? It's nothing like that. You really will sweat. It is blood, sweat, and tears. Pupillage is painful. It's grilling. It's long. You're going to be poor way before you make money. You're going to put in so many hours that you probably can't bill for. You're going to lose friends. You probably might lose family in the process. But you're going to give so much more than you get back for a very long time. But when you do start getting back, it's so worth it. I would do this 100 times over, despite all the challenges, despite all the difficulties, despite the transformation issues, despite really everything that being a woman at the bar comes with. Despite all of those things, I would still do this 100 times over, because it's what I'm good at. It's what I'm passionate about. I can't imagine myself doing anything else. And if you really feel that strongly about it, then don't let anybody tell you what you can and can't do. And people will want to tell you at the bar what you can and can't do, how you can and cannot hold yourself, what cases you can and can't take, what you are or are not capable of. But take a chance, take that leap of faith, and trust yourself. And I suppose more than anything, try and surround yourself with people who have your best interest at heart, who are willing to help you, who are willing to nurture you. Network, network, network. You can never network enough at the bar. But more than anything, be clear about your reasons for why you want to go to the bar before you do. Be very clear, be very firm on your principles. And when you do get there, don't change for anyone.
All right. Thank you so much, Advocate. That was a mouthful.
I tend to do that.
I personally have learned a lot. I'm sure all my viewers will also learn so much from what you just said in this session. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure. Like I said, it's difficult. It's a very, very long road ahead. Nobody's going to shower you with roses when you get there. No one, absolutely no one. But if you have that passion, that fire, you must have the fire first. Despite everything I've said, you must have that fire, and that must be that undying quench that you have in you to do this. For whatever reason, if that fire is strong enough, it will carry you through the challenges. And once you get to the other side of them, you see that it is indeed a noble profession. We have the privilege of changing people's lives. We have the privilege of crafting the country. We have the privilege of impacting on thousands and thousands of people's lives daily without them even knowing. Some of the things we do, some of the cases we tackle, the people will never come and thank you directly. They don't even know you're doing what you're doing. You're not a celebrity, so nobody's going to come and thank you. No one is going to recognize you when you walk on the street. That's not why we do this. But there is a need for practitioners. There is a need for, advancing and upholding the rule of law. There is people who believe in justice, and those crusaders who wanted to come and fight for justice in many forms, whether it's because you believe in strongly in fairness of contract, whether you believe criminals must go to jail, whether you believe only people who've really committed crime and who've been proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt must go to jail, whether you believe strongly in protecting children and families and you want to practice family law, whether you really are just nagged by how you've seen some injustices in legislation, or you think you want to take on industry and maybe the banking sector, maybe you have issues with the environment or the mining sector. This is really a platform where there is no limit to what legal practitioners can do when they put their mind to it, and they're strong enough and passionate enough to do it. So I guess if you're one of those people who think you have a calling, I guess do it.
Yeah.
That's what it takes, a calling.
All right.
It's not about glamorous stuff. The robe is nice, the bib is nice, so is the long bags and maybe sometimes the long hours, but it's about a lot more than that. So I think it's important for you viewers to realize that there's a lot more pain in being part of this process than there is the glory. But
yeah,
when you get that judgment, when you get that victory, and eventually when you realize on how many people's lives you impact on, directly or indirectly, it is quite fulfilling, and there's nothing like it.
all right. Thank you so much, Advocate.
All right.
I hope you like the content. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.